I'm fascinated just by the passage of time and on simple, just like ephemeral things that we witness that will never happen again. Again, like the tint of a sky after a dust storm, or like the groupings of a pelican skimming over the water, or um, like a car headlight that pops, into view when I'm trying to take a picture of the Milky Way. So these are all things that I really am drawn to and am in. I'm not sure everybody always feels the same way based on just kind of like feedback from friends and family and whatnot. But I feel like my secret desire was to be like a travel photographer, like a travel journalist, or, just like a National Geographic photographer, something like that. Just documenting just kind of everyday life and things like that. They just really fascinate me. Um, Before we start to go in, like if you guys have questions, feel free like to type them into the chat, but also don't hesitate, just jump on in and ask. I don't like listening to myself ramble on for a long time. So if you guys have anything you want to know or talk about more in depth, just jump on in and we can talk about it. So me and West Texas. So I've pretty much been coming out. So I wasn't born in Texas, but I've been going to West Texas for pretty much most of my life. The first trip was with my family in the 7th grade, and I was just sick the entire time. Like, pull over dad, I have to puke out the window, kind of sick. Just like as an aside, let's talk about sunscreen, y'all, because we had climbed Guadalupe Peak, the day before that time, and I didn't wear sunscreen because it was the 80s, and I was so burnt. Like, I just can't. Yeah, sunscreen. We've learned so much since the 80s. But live and learn. But despite how sick I was, I just couldn't stop thinking about that place. Like the blue skies, the wide open spaces, just the blooming cactus. I was born in Seattle, and my dad worked for the US Customs Service. So we kind of moved around the country a bit. And so up in the Pacific Northwest and in Canada as well. And so moving to Texas, like the landscape out there is just so different than anything I'd ever seen before. It was literally like something out of a movie. And since then, I've been back countless times, like literally countless. I have no idea how many times I've gone out there, 20, 25. I really don't know. But I've gone out there pretty much every phase of my life. And it's just been like the one constant in my life is trips out to West Texas, Big Bend, Guadalupe. It's just always there. So I'm hoping today to kind of share some aspects of this place and what I really like about it. I've grouped this into a couple of different buckets. One is the history of it. I'm fascinated by history, so we'll talk a little bit about the history that really draws me to it. Just the fact that everything is just so sharp and stabby and just wants to poke you. That's kind of a controversial take on it, but I actually really like that. The sweeping views that are out there, just the sense of adventure that I personally feel out there, and I think a lot of other folks feel the same way. And also just the night sky. So part one is just the history. Like the history out there is just on a huge grand scale every place you look. If you're a geologist, you can see millions of years of turmoil and change and volcanoes and dinosaur bones and evidence of long gone seas. And it's just fascinating. I'm not a geologist, so I'm more interested in the human aspect of it. Huge history buff. I have a master's in medieval history and a master's in library and information science. And so old stuff it just really tickles my fancy. I just think it's really fascinating. And it's out there, right? So if we were to jump back, say 10,000 years or so, the climate in that region was a lot cooler and wetter. How many people have been out to like the Big Bend National Park? Anybody? Show of hands? Yeah, a lot of folks have. So if we were to go back in time 10,000 years, the climate would be very similar to what you find in the upper peaks of the Chisos and the Guadalupes. So forests, rain, water, just different. And so gradually over time, the area became hotter and more arid, which is how it was when the first recorded history started in the 1500s. Although Native Americans had been living out there for tens of thousands of years prior to that. So lots of different people lived out there, but we only know the name of the last couple of them, like the Comanches, the Apaches, this group called the Chisos, who probably gave the Chisos Mountains the name. And so there's scattered traces of these people all around. Like I personally have found arrowheads out there. There's cave markings like this one on the far left. It's an etching into a rock in the far west part of the park called a petroglyph. You can see rock paintings sometimes. The picture on the top right there is like little hands, that somebody blew pigments on and blew around their hands. That was in a cave, a rock shelter I came across. And mortar holes, which are like little areas, they're everywhere. And that's where people would grind like plants, grind them down to eat them. Mortar holes are probably the most common thing that you would find out there. They're literally everywhere in the park. But even outside the park, there's some pretty astounding cave paintings. This is actually Seminole Canyon, which is down in the valley close to Del Rio. And it's astonishing. It's really beautiful. This particular picture in particular, it's always, I don't know, the figure in the center is just very spooky and eerie for me, especially when I was a kid. My grandmother in Canada, my mom was from Canada, so a lot of Canadian, prim, proper Canadians on that side of the family. So my grandmother was a retired principal, very prim, proper. And after my grandfather died, she and another one of her friends, who was also a widow, they roomed together. And so I don't know whose book it was, if it was my grandmother's or the roommates, but they had this huge stack of just UFO conspiracy books. So I don't know who it was, but like inside there is all sorts of like alien civilizations, aliens. And one of them was this picture of a rock painting of these alleged, air quote, aliens, and they had no mouths. And it just scared the heck out of me when I was a kid. And so when I saw this one, especially that figure in the middle, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the aliens are among us. I don't really believe that, but it's really striking. It's just beautiful. The first ranchers, they started showing up in the 1880s. And I think that's what a lot of us think of when we think about West Texas. I mean, I certainly do. This picture was taken around Marfa. Literally, I was just driving down the road and I saw these longhorns. And I tried taking a picture of that white cow, actually, who's kind of in the middle left distance there. And as I was taking the picture, like this guy in the center just charged me. He just like put his head down. He did not like me at all. And so put his head down, charged me. After I stopped screaming, I opened my eyes and he was just standing at the fence. So I took his picture. And so I think of him every time I have a hamburger now. But lots of cows and ranches out there. And that really started in the 1880s. And in the Big Bend region, one thing that really impressed me in what's now the national park is that folks valued education, right? And so this is a windmill at a place called Dugout Wells, and it's kind of in the center of the national park now. And it was a site of a school. And so there is a rancher in the area. He would ride his horse into the school Sunday night. He would teach Monday through Friday. He would ride home to his ranch Friday night, work on his ranch, and then repeat it over and over again. And so he had long distances to travel. His wife had to run the ranch when he wasn't around, so she probably did most of the work. Kids had to travel a long ways, but it really strikes me as, just folks really valued education. And that's just really kind of inspiring for me that even back then, under all that hardship, they made the effort to, have a school and teach their kids, which I just find really, really admirable. So this is a picture of Terlingua Cemetery, which is one of the little towns outside of the national park. And so in the 1900s, Big Bend experienced a boom, relatively speaking, of cinnabar, which is the ore from which mercury is derived. And so mercury mines and mining became the largest economic force in the region. In fact, that the Big Bend region was one of the leading, if not the leading, producers of mercury in the first decades of the 20th century. And Terlingua, it became a boom town, and it was a huge center. And you can still go to, I imagine if you folks, anyone's been out there, have y'all been to Terlingua? Anybody been to Terlingua?
Yeah.
It's really worth visiting. it was just literally in ruins, just adobe shacks until, gosh, I don't know, the 70s, 1970s, 1980s, when people started basically squatting out there and living in them. And now it's definitely its own little town. But the cemetery is, I think it's on the National Registry of Historical Places, and the cemetery itself is really eerily beautiful. It's really fantastic for photography. It's great for just visiting because there's so many of these graves, and a lot of them are just unmarked. I don't know if they were originally marked, but and it's just weathered off, but just all these unmarked graves. But there's still people, families who live out there who still tend to them. And so if you go out to the cemetery, you'll still see flowers or, coins or beer bottles or whatever that people leave in memory of, on these poor little graves. And it's just really, it's kind of inspiring in a way. But yeah, it's beautiful. I definitely recommend just the cemetery, if nothing else. It's really touching to visit it, and great photography as well. There's a mine inside what was now the national park, the Mariscal mine, and kind of like in the lower center part of the park. And even today, it's also on the National Historical Registry, and is just a site of picturesque ruin. There's all these cabins, mines, abandoned mine shafts. So, watch your step. And it's just a really great place to explore. You kind of need a high clearance vehicle to get down there. It's not a paved road at all. It's an old Jeep trail, but I have an old Subaru. It made it down there fine. So it's really worth visiting. And this is actually one of my favorite photos. Technically, it's not a great photo at all. It's just kind of a blob, but for me, it really captures just how rugged and precarious life was out there. Like, just the huge amount of work that went into building this. I mean, if you look at it, it's hard to tell in the photo, but it's this perfectly proportioned cabin with windows, and there is a porch on the other side, and it was situated in a way that whoever lived there, probably a foreman or somebody fairly important, they would have a view of the mountains when they looked out their windows, or they sat on the porch. And there's just so much effort that went into it, and now it's just abandoned. So it's just hard to imagine just transporting the materials over these rough mule roads. It's really hard. And so to me, this photo sums up just the sheer difficulty that folks experienced out there, which is just really fascinating to me. You also can't talk about the history out there without talking about the frontier, both from the point of view of westward expansion across the US and also the frontier with Mexico. So this is Santa Elena Canyon, which is one of the major canyons in the park. And this is the Rio Grande River, of course. And so on the left is Mexico, and on the right is the US. And so especially in the 1800s and even the early 1900s, the border was really more of a kind of like an abstract concept than something that governed their daily lives. And so people would just kind of cross the borders. There's stories of people getting married and having wedding parties, and people crossing the river and dancing the night away in Mexico and then going back home to the US, and vice versa. And so it's definitely a community in the area that just kind of shared a culture on both sides of the river, which was interesting. But that didn't last, right? And so by the 1880s, as the US started expanding across the country and really defining its own borders, there were 40 forts in Texas. A lot of them came in the 1840s and the 1850s during like the pioneer days, Oregon Trail, stuff like that. And the Army itself started establishing more of a presence in the border region and the Big Bend region in the early 1900s, especially after the Mexican Revolution started spreading. So there was a time, for instance, in 1960, where a village called Glen Springs was raided by bandits. Basically, they claimed to be Pancho Villa supporters, and some folks were killed and some soldiers were killed. And so after that, the cavalry started establishing more and more forts in the area. This is in a place called Castellon, which is on the west side of the national park. This was called Camp Santa Helena. This was never actually fully occupied, which again, I just find really interesting that, again, so much work, so much effort went into establishing this fort. And by the time, it was ready to be occupied, there's no budget left for to support troops. So everybody got pulled out and no one actually got to enjoy, the barracks and the stables and all this stuff that they spent all this time building. But oh well. There's actually kind of a fun fact. So years ago, you can camp in the park. There's campgrounds, of course, there's lodges, there's hotels. There's also these, what they call roadside campsites. And there's a roadside campsite next to the ruins of Glen Springs. And so when I say ruins, that's kind of a euphemism. There's really nothing to see, but there's a campsite where Glen Springs used to be. And my brother and I, another Kingwood graduate, he shared, my brother Mike, he's been on a lot of trips with me to Big Bend. And one time we were camping out there. And as we set up camp that night, we started noticing these lights kind of bobbing in the hills around us. And we noticed every time we moved, like the lights would kind of move. And there was a road going by and it looked like there was somebody holding a lantern or something walking down the road, but they never showed up. And we just started getting spooked. We're like, oh, who's out here? It's like, so it's a very spooky experience. And so we got into the tent that night and it's pitch black. And Mike's like, hey, are you awake? And I was like, I'm awake. Yeah. He's like, really? Do you think you're going to sleep tonight? And I was like, no. Are you going to sleep tonight? He's like, no. So we just like packed up and got the heck out of there and just left it. And so years later, it turns out, have you guys ever heard of the Marfa ghost lights? You know what I'm talking about? Well, apparently in Marfa, there's these mysterious lights that kind of show up and they've built like a viewing area. You can see these ghost lights. Well, apparently Glen Springs has these ghost lights as well. And that's what I think we saw is like this random atmospheric something phenomenon of just lights kind of bouncing around. It was spooky. It's like it was one of the few like spooky experiences I've had in the park. But yeah, creepy. It was very creepy. This is taken actually in Big Bend Ranch State Park. And this is, I like to think of it as a traffic jam out there. I was just driving, kind of exploring around one time on a solo camping trip. And I turned down this dirt road and all of a sudden there's this herd of longhorn just kind of moseying along on the road. So I followed them because like, what else could I do? But eventually like the lead cow, like this mama longhorn at the very front, like she noticed me. And so she actually got all the other cows off the road. And so I could pass them. And then they got back on the road and did their thing afterwards. Part two, stabby stabby. And so like, I just think everything is so harsh and unforgiving out in the desert. And so I find it just really incredible and amazing just how plants and animals and even people have adapted to living out there. And that's, like I mentioned earlier, that's a controversial opinion. My wife is from Odessa and she's like, no, it's not fun. It's not interesting. It's just, her childhood getting stabbed by cactus needles and stickers and burrs and scorpions. She doesn't have the romantic view of it that I do, but I just think it's really beautiful. Like case in point, this is a trail called the Dodson Trail. And so this is a single trail that kind of cuts across the base of the Chisos Mountains in the center of the park. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but this is just a bird's nest, right? So there's no trees out there for them to build their nests in. And so I've forgotten what species this is. I looked it up at one point, but whatever it is adapted to just build nests inside cactus. It's learned to avoid, because there's a lot of pokey needles on there. They've learned to avoid all the needles and just make use of the materials, which is really, really neat. And like cactus in particular, I just find really fascinating. Like purple, I love purple cactus. I don't really have a great photo of a purple cactus or I'd include it, but I just think it's really cool that they come in all these different shapes and sizes and even heart shapes or whatever. They're just everywhere and they're just really neat. I also like that the area lends itself to black and white photography. Like this picture was taken in the middle of the day. And so you can see there's some clouds out there, but the light was just awful, just terrible, terrible, terrible. But in black and white, it actually looks really, really nice, I think. This is from a viewpoint near the old Ore Road, which is an old mining road that was built in the area. Unfortunately, since this picture was taken, the Park Service has put up a giant road sign right in the middle of the hill, so it kind of messes up the view. But yeah, just great black and white. This is in a place called Grapevine Hills, which this is actually a trail leading up to. It's a balanced rock. It's like a rock window with a rock boulder on top of some other ones. I'm sure you've probably seen pictures of it if you haven't seen it yourself. But the trail itself to the window goes through this little valley with just amazing, just rock formations, these cool pinnacles and spires and boulders everywhere. And, they look so much better in black and white, I feel like. And this is another one that was taken probably around 3 or 4 in the afternoon when the light was just atrocious. If you were to see this in color, it would just be terrible. But in black and white, this is a picture of the Elephant Tusk, which is my second favorite named mountain in the park, also taken from the Dodson Trail. And in black and white, it just sings, it just really shows off the landscape, I think. Ditto with this one. This is on the Paint Gap Road looking towards the Chisos. This is from another solo camping trip I did a few years ago where I just parked off of this kind of dirt road here and just woke up in the morning and saw this vista, and it's beautiful. But even like in color, like this is early morning on the Rio Grande. It just really shows off, I think, the stark nature of the you can see some cactus, some scrubs, some masatillo, and the mountains in the distance. It's just beautiful, I think. And then this is kind of like everything, right? So there's some cactus, there's Sotol, the sun. This is in a place called Sotol Vista, which is probably my favorite spot in the park. It's also, just side note, probably the best sunsets in Texas. It's astounding. You can see in the distance Santa Elena Canyon's out there. There's mountains. It's just phenomenal. Actually, I've told my wife that she could scatter my ashes there at some point. Someday in the future, like that's probably where I'd like to go. So this is the one place. Every time I've come out to the national park, I've always come here. This is the one spot that I've come every time, over and over and over again. Which leads to part 3. So just like the sweeping views. This picture is actually taken from Sotol Vista as well. You can see in the center, there's Santa Elena Canyon with the mountains of Mexico and the US kind of blending together behind it. What's great about that area is, Texas is what, 96, 97% private ownership. So it's just hard to get out and get lost. It's hard to get out and just see forever because there's so many just like fences and trees and just it's hard to get out there. So this is one of the few places I feel like in Texas that you can get out and just feel like the immenseness around you. This is a sunrise photo taken on the Guadalupe Peak. In the foreground, there's another peak called El Capitan, and so this was taken. Again, this is another trip with my brother and I. We had the great idea that we wanted to see the summer solstice from the very top of Texas. So we backpacked up, and there's a campground up there. So we backpacked up, spent the night. The plan being that we would get up early and see sunrise from the peak, but solstice happens in June, and June in the desert is hot, and so we left in the afternoon and. Oh gosh, it was so hot. It was probably 100, 105 degrees going up that trail, 7,000, 8,000 feet elevation with a big 40-pound pack on our backs full of water. And it was awful, but we survived. It's just one of the many times I've almost gotten us both killed, my brother and I out there, but we lived. And we saw this beautiful sunrise, excuse me. And you can actually see the curvature of the earth, which is just very few places you can see that. And this is one of those photos. It's just like, only in Texas, y'all. So like this is a hitching post up 8,000 feet in the sky on the top of Guadalupe Peak. So you can just ride your horse up there. So this is a picture in Big Bend National Park. And so this is a photo I've been planning for a long, long time. There's an app you can get on your phone, maybe a website as well. It's called Photo Pills. And I use it a bunch when I'm planning things. it helps with calculating, amongst other things, but it helps calculate like where the sun and the moon is going to be on a given day. So very valuable if you're interested in landscape photography. And so using that app, I realized that the moon was going to set perfectly between those two peaks. That's called the window in Big Bend on a certain day of December. And so again, my brother and I, we drove out there, camped, got up really early, drove to the window. It was probably like 20 degrees that morning, froze, but we saw this amazing sunrise. And so this is actually another great place for sunsets in Texas. If you haven't been out there, it's easy to get to. It's fantastic. But we stayed up, got up in the morning, and right as the moon was about to hit the horizon where I wanted it to be, that's when the clouds rolled in. And so I never actually got my shot, which, that happens. But if I was better at Photoshop, I probably would have like put the moon on the horizon, but I'm terrible at Photoshop. So this is about as good as I got before those clouds rolled in. This is another, this is taken in a place called the Pine Canyon Campground. And so it's another roadside campground in the park. And so this is not retouched or anything. The skies really were that red that morning. I've never seen such red skies like that before. And it was just incredible. This was actually my second kind of spooky experience in the park, where I think this is my first time I'd ever gone camping out there solo. And nowadays you can reserve everything online. Those days you actually had to go to a ranger station and get a permit and camp out in the backcountry. And so I got that. And they set me up in this spot in Pine Canyon. And so I set up my tent, it was great. And then when evening came, when it was time for me to get into the tent and go to bed, I just had this really weird feeling. Like I couldn't bring myself to get inside my tent that night. It was just the weirdest, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't force myself to get inside the tent. And so instead I slept in my car, which is great. In hindsight was great. So I could look out and I could see the stars and I could see the sky, which only lasted for maybe a minute with this shade of red. And so I was able to get a picture, but I've never had an experience like that before or since. Years later, turns out that was a site of one of the few unsolved murders in the national park, was taken at that campground a few years before I was there. If I was a better storyteller, I'd say it was 5 years to the day or 10 years to the day when I was there. It wasn't, but it's just this spooky, weird feeling I've never felt anywhere else camping before. But at least I got this photo. So this is Mule Ears Peak, which is actually my favorite mountain in the park. It's just great. The name is perfectly named for it. Two volcanic peaks that eroded and left, the mule ears behind. Great for posing someone in front and taking pictures with mule ears behind them. And this is another bonus black and white. So this is a mountain called Casa Grande. And this was a backpacking trip, a solo backpacking trip I did up to the South Rim one year. And which was neat in that it rained the entire time, which I'm not a big fan of rain, but it was interesting to see rain and fog and clouds during that trip, which is rare for the desert. It meant that I had absolutely no view. So I climbed, 6 miles and 3,000 feet on my, with a backpack to see absolutely nothing, which is a bummer. But right as I was loading up the car to go home, the clouds lifted for just a minute or two, and there's this peak. And so this is another one, looks terrible, absolutely terrible in color, but it looks fantastic in black and white, I think. So another great reason to come out here is the hiking, which I love. I've done that oodles. You can also go river running, which I've never actually done, but you can go on rafting trips or canoe trips, exploring canyons, either as a day trip or an overnight trip. And there's also these really neat old jeep trails in the interior, which this is a photo of one of them heading towards. This is actually driving towards that Glen Springs campsite that with the ghost lights I mentioned a little bit ago. And so this is one of the backcountry's trails called the Dodson. And so I dreamed about doing this trail for years and years and years. This is probably just the best hike I've ever done. Um, that morning, my brother had a bum knee, and so he couldn't do the trail with me, which was actually perfect because that way he could drop me off on one end and pick me up on the other, and no backtracking, which is great. But the entire time I was out there, it was just, there was no one. Like, I saw literally no one. I was out on that trail all day, like probably 12 hours on that trail, and I didn't see a single person. And it was beautiful, and it was lonely, and it was exciting, and it was just this amazing sense of just complete freedom out there. It was just fantastic. Uh, as it turns out, I got a late start that morning, and so we had left it that he would pick me up at sunset, um, at this one place. And since we were late, and at one point I got turned around and lost, and so I didn't actually show up until about an hour after sunset. And so poor Mike was just freaking out, the entire time, thinking, "Oh gosh, how do I go and tell mom that I lost Rob?" But I ended up fine. He was fine, but I think it was a little tense for him, but we all made it. This is a picture taken from the Dodson, actually. This was taken probably around the time that I was supposed to meet Mike, which clearly didn't happen. But you can see, maybe you can, maybe you can't, you can kind of see the trail sneaking around on one of those ridges. And then there's a peak in the distance. It's called Carousel Mountain. And so it looks like a carousel. And so we were actually supposed to meet a little past that. So you can see, I still had miles and miles and miles to go before we met up. But just astounding views, just beautiful. This is a picture of a place called the Mesa de Anguilla. And so this is, I feel like it's not very well visited. It's on the far west side of the park. And to actually get here, you have to go to a place called Lajitas, which is a resort out there, maybe past the park. And the trailhead is actually through a golf course. So you really get a sense of rugged adventure as you go through the ninth tee box to get to the trail. But it's just great. It goes up to the saddle, and just it goes across this plateau. And there's all these views of Badlands. So you can see a little speck of orange. That's our tent, like we set up at base camp, and we just kind of explored for a day. And we're right about 1,000 feet above the Rio Grande. And then there's mountains and badlands and canyons all around us. And so it's a really great place. It's very remote, no water. I don't know if I'd ever go back, to be honest, but I'm really glad we did it. This particular trip, we hiked, we came back, we packed up, we went to Alpine, which is a fairly good sized town out there. And when we were at the Dairy Queen, at the Quickie Mart, getting like ice cream and slushies because we were exhausted and hot. The clerk asked us, what are you guys up to? And so we said, "Oh, we just came back. We're, backpacking in the Mesa de Anguilla." And he's like, "Oh my gosh, really? There was a German hiker who was just attacked by a mountain lion a couple of days ago." And we're like, "Oh gosh, wow, that's crazy." And so for years, I've told people, we just narrowly avoided getting attacked by a mountain lion. But when I was actually researching for this story, I realized that it wasn't quite true. They weren't German, they were Spanish. It wasn't a male, it was a woman. He said that the German had thrown rocks at the mountain lion because, he wasn't pleased with the picture. So he wanted the mountain lion to do something so he could take a picture. It turns out she threw rocks at the mountain lion because it was actually attacking her and trying to eat her. And so she threw rocks. And it didn't happen a couple of days before we went there. It actually happened a couple of years before we went there. So that was very disappointing. We didn't have, any immediacy, but still a beautiful trip and gorgeous, gorgeous scenery. This is one of my favorite hikes in the park as well, the Pine Canyon. And so it just cuts across kind of like this open green. Every time I've been there, different times of year, it's always pretty green as well. This green landscape with grasses and sodals, and then it leads to a waterfall. And so this is the Pine Canyon waterfall. And so when it's running, it's one of the tallest in the States. It's over 100 feet. I've probably done this hike 4 or 5 times, and I've only seen it running once. And so it's really fantastic to see that one time. Very, you're just roaring, rushing water. You would not expect to see something like that out in the desert. It's just really neat. Then this is the aptly named Road to Nowhere in Big Bend Ranch State Park. This cuts across a rock formation called the Solitario, which it looks like a giant meteor crater on a map, but apparently it's a collapsed like lava dome, and but very neat. And so this cuts across and goes to nowhere, but has huge, wide open vistas, which is beautiful, but nerve wracking because that is a very steep drop fall off to the far right there. And if there's a car coming the other way, there's nowhere to turn around. But fortunately, on this day, it's just me alone on the road. So the last part are the stars, and this is just phenomenal. Big Bend has some of the darkest skies in the world. It's slowly development is starting to encroach a little bit on that. I've noticed over the last 30 years or so that it seems not quite as dark as it was that I remember as a kid, but it's still phenomenally dark. And so I'm going to try and see if this works, but every once in a while I tried doing time lapses, and this was one of the very few successful overnight time lapses I've ever managed to pull off. Most of the time something goes wrong and like the battery dies or the camera gets knocked over or the memory card gets full, and it just it never works out. And like, if you guys see, remember like A Christmas Story, like, that movie, you're going to shoot your eye out, kid. There's always like the dad in the basement, like comic book cursing. Rah, rah, frickin', frickin'. That's me every time I try to do time lapse, because there's always like something horrible that goes wrong and it never works out. But this is one of the few times that it actually worked. And so this was set up. I was camping at a site. This is maybe a quarter mile for me. And so imagine coyotes howling the entire time, because that's what I've heard from the campsite while this was going. And so that's probably about 14 hours of elapsed time. Like I said, it's probably about a quarter mile from where I was camped. They allow fires in the state park, which is nice. So I was just sitting by my fire with hot cocoa, watching the stars and listening to the coyotes while the camera was doing all the work, recording the Milky Way and the sunrise the next morning. So this is kind of a weird picture, but a lot of people ask, when they see all these photos of the Milky Way, they ask, does it really look like that out there? And, the answer is kind of yes and no. As you guys know, like the cameras just can pick up so much more light than the human eye can see. And so whenever I see the Milky Way out there with my eyes, I can see there's a blur, I can see there's lights, I can see stars, but the camera itself picks up more. And so like this is a picture unedited, like straight out of the camera. And the reason I took this in the first place was that even with my own kind of naked eye, I could see the lights of the stars reflected in my car hood, the entire time, which I'd never seen before. And you can see they're really there in that picture, but even in this picture, it looked just like that. It just looked like glints of starlight coming off the windshields, which was so great. But whenever I do take pictures of the Milky Way, I try not to do too much trickery. Some people, I feel like some people it verges more into digital artwork than photography. And so I usually do a single exposure. Every once in a while, I'll stack a couple pictures together. That first black and white picture I took for this section was actually 4 or 5 that I stacked together just to get more detail out of the photos. But some folks are really good at like blending foregrounds and backgrounds, or they'll take one picture where the foreground is perfectly exposed and they'll take another picture of the background. And I don't mind that. I just don't enjoy it. I don't like that very much. Some people also just take a picture of the Milky Way and just put it behind an arbitrary foreground. And that to me, that's where I kind of draw the line. I feel like that's more digital artwork than photography, but it's all good either way. But my point being, it's a fantastic place for stars and Milky Way photography, and just trying it out. Like if you haven't done astrophotography before, it's just an easy place to get phenomenal pictures. So this is a picture. It's a single exposure of a storm. June and July is the monsoon season out there, and so this was taken in July one year. And so you can see there's a lightning storm, there's a thunderstorm in the horizon, and so it's pouring rain out there. But there's just enough break in the clouds where the Milky Way shone through, and yeah, it was fantastic. Another one of my favorite photos. This was taken during the Great Conjunction in 2020. I don't know if you guys remember that, but that was when Saturn and Jupiter were really super close in the night sky in December. And so this was taken from a backcountry campsite that December, not pictured the actual Great Conjunction. That was probably somewhere off camera left out of the frame. But you can see that in the background, there is one of the bands of the Milky Way right there. So in the winter, like the galactic core, which is the really cool part that is so photogenic, that sinks below the horizon. And so that pops up into view around February, and then it vanishes in September every year, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. And so in the winter months, you can't see the core, but it's dark enough that you can see like an arm of it, just hanging out. Then this is the road to the basin, which is the center of the park in the Chisos Mountains, taken one night as well. This is a little different for me. Usually with astrophotography, as you may or may not know if you've done it before, that the longer the, I'm drawing a blank, the longer the lens, the more apparent movement of the stars is. So oftentimes people will do like their widest lens possible. So my widest lens is a 16 millimeter. And so usually I shoot at 16 millimeters. And so you can keep your camera exposed longer before you start seeing star trails with a 16 millimeter lens. So this was taken at 70 millimeters. So the stars are probably a little blurry, like if you were to look closely, but I just really like the zoomed in effect of the mountain with the galaxy behind it. Also, if you look at it in the right way, it looks like George Washington on his back, staring at the sky. And so once you see it, you can't not see it. This is taken with a more traditional lens. This is 15 millimeters. And this was actually the first astro photo I ever took. This was the Guadalupe Mountains. Most people, if they go there, they're in the mountains themselves, but there's actually a district of the park out to the west that are these salt flats. And so you can go drive out there. And so this was taken with just a tiny quarter sliver of a moon behind us. And so that lit up the road. And if you look at the bottom, it's actually a self-portrait. You can see shadows. The one on the left is me, and the one on the right is my brother, Mike. And so we're just kind of hanging out with this. We couldn't see it at all. It was pitch black for us. But again, the camera picks up so much more light than we can see. And so, it picked it up there. And this is the color version of that opening slide I had. So this is probably 5 or 6 photos. I used a program called Starry Landscape Stacker that just kind of stacked all of the photos on top of each other and brought out more details that a single photo would get. And that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. If you want to connect with me, this is my website, Instagram, I'm Pluto911. But otherwise, if you have any questions, I'd love to talk about it.
Have you ever flown over the park in an airplane?
I never have. Have you?
Yes, I have. I don't know if he still does it, but there's an old park ranger that used to fly out of Terralingo Airport. And that was a pretty unique way to be able to see the expanse of the park.
I'll bet. I know, like, I think Marfa had an airfield at one point in the 20s, 30s, 40s, like that. So I know there was an aviation history for the park, but yeah, I've never flown. That would be something to see.
Wow.
What's the best time of year to go?
That depends. My favorite time of year is probably in the spring, say March, April. That's kind of a double-edged sword because that coincides with spring break, which is the absolute busiest part of season to see it. But in the spring, uh, it's temperate during the day, so it might get into the 90s, but not seriously hot. But everything's in bloom. So cactus are in bloom, daffodils in bloom. It's just really kind of the best of all worlds, I feel like. The summer, surprisingly, and I just was out there a little while ago. The summer is unbearably hot, and some folks have actually there were some deaths in the park this year due to heat. This has been a brutal summer. But the summer is neat too. That is monsoon season, and so that if you're lucky, there will be rainstorms during the day, and so that cools everything down. And there's all sorts of pour-offs and waterfalls that just pop up out of nowhere, especially up in the basin, that are really incredible to see. And so that's kind of, spring is better. Winter is nice, but the nights are so short and cold. I mean, most of the times I've gone out there has been in the winter, late fall, early winter, but spring to early summer are really great times to go, I think.
Okay.
Rob, what lens and equipment do you normally take with you when you're photographing?
So I shoot Canon, and so I've had a number. The photos that we saw today were on a range of cameras, ranging from an old 30D. I don't think I have any yet. I have an AE1 that I've shot out there as well. I don't think any of those pictures today were on the AE1. So a 30D and a 6D are most of the cameras I've got. Recently, I have an R5 as well, and so in the last year or so, R5. But those are the camera bodies and lenses. For astro work, I have a 15 to 35, but my absolute favorite lens to shoot landscapes is a 70 to 200. And so it's big, it's heavy, it weighs a ton, but personally, I like focal lengths that are outside of what the human eye sees. And so if the human eye sees, say, 50 millimeters, I like things that are either wider than that or more narrow than that. That's what I usually gravitate towards. So the 70 to 200 is probably my most common lens that I've shot out there.
Do you use any kind of tracking device?
I've tried a little bit. So with that time lapse, I used a little thing called, it's made by a company called SERP, who just got bought by Manfrotto a few years ago, but this is called a SERP Genie Mini. And so it looks like a hockey puck, and it has a little motor that rotates. And so you can time it to correspond with the Earth's rotation. It's not programmed to that. That's more trial and error. So that's how I've used on some things. I do have a star tracker, which I've used once or twice, but what I found is usually the car is so full of stuff anyways that gets bumped. And so like it's perfect for use out there, a star tracker to keep, especially to freeze the stars and use like a higher focal length lens with the stars. But I just usually don't bring it. I always plan to, and then it seems to always get bumped.
Have you ever taken photos at McDonald Observatory?
I haven't taken photos. I have visited up there, and the star parties are fantastic. I actually went to one, gosh, it was a year ago, but I really love the star parties. The folks who give the tours, I've done it maybe 3 or 4 times over the years, and the folks who give the tours are just so great. So talented. So it is really fun. But as far as like photos, I don't think I've hiked in the Davis Mountains and taken photos out there once or twice, but nothing really earth-shattering that I've personally taken in that area, which is like an oversight on my part. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Are there any other questions for Rob? No. And so, Rob, thank you so much for your presentation. Your pictures are gorgeous. I love them.
Thank you so much.
Star photography is one of my favorites, so I really enjoyed the ones that you put up in the Milky Way in the Big Bend. It is so dark. When we were there, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And did you ever know a man called TJ Avery? He used to do tours, workshops in the big band. And he was the one who told us to always put a tea candle under your tripod so that you don't lose it. And that night it was like, wow, there's my tripod. So it is very, very dark. So I'm very impressed that you're backpacking in that wilderness out there.
It's dark and there's always creepy noises like in the background, like rustling. And like
Yeah.
my imagination always goes crazy. Like, what was that? What is that? What is
Well,
it going?
growing up, they always had the story of the hand or whatever, the noise above the car on the car roof, and you get out and you find out it's someone hanging from the tree, you know.
Yeah,
So we
we
did.
actually, our photo club took a tour to Big Bend, and we actually, when we were leaving, we saw some bears.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, Connie got him.
Yeah.
She got a good picture of him. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
cold. That was February, March.
Yeah.
April.
I think it was like May.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was cold.
It was May.
Yeah. Anyway, so Rob,
jealous.
thank you so much.
Sure.
I think Chuck put this as a film or a video, so we'll put it on our website for everyone to enjoy.
Great. Thanks,
Okay.
y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Chris Summers is very good at putting a lot of educational stuff in Chuck too. So Chuck, do you want to talk about the calendar?
Oh, the calendar, okay, yeah. Let me just over here so I can read what you got. We're looking at photographer's lunch, still doing that. We had a great lunch at the Hunan restaurant. That was in person. So we do video Zoom every Wednesday at 12:30, and then we do a real lunch once a month. I'm not sure where our next one is, but Hunan was the last one. It was good. I highly recommend it. It's very good. As we're doing that, let's see, monthly post-processing SIG.
Behind you.
I am going to start, I talked to Chuck last night. I'm going to be away in October on finally taking a trip somewhere to take some pictures. But in November, I want to try and get something going with post-processing where we'll cover some maybe a new technique in Lightroom or a new tool, and maybe a little one in Photoshop and one in something like Luminar or on one, because there's not, or what is it, the Photoshop Express or the mini Photoshop. So we'll start that sometime in November, December, and then we'll get it going into the new year.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that is going to start up again. Thank you, Chris. Chris is going to be leading it. That I'll be his. I'll be.
Yeah, I'll call on you.
And then we've had one workshop this last week, which was really cool. It was the art and photography, and we're following it up with another one, the art and photography, the rest of the story, which is going to be about post processing, or as he says, screwing around with pictures that certain people like to do. So that's usually because people don't know how to do it. But we'll talk about post-processing. And what we're going to talk about there is not so much how to do Lightroom. It's more what you should be doing in post-processing to enhance your pictures, to tell the story that you want to tell. And that's a flyer for it right there. So it's really about the art, not about the specific techniques. Okay, but we'll get into techniques.
Yeah, you gotta come to the post-processing SIG to get the technique.
Yeah, that's right. So that'll be hopefully
That's a teaser.
another one this next month.
Chuck, what day of the week is that? October?
Saturday.
It's Saturday.
Saturday.
And that is the same day as the solar eclipse.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I got room in the library.
Yeah.
And I'll think of you when I'm in France having a glass of wine.
Please do.
You know, the solar eclipse is supposed to be outstanding in Albuquerque, but it's the same weekend as the balloon.
Yes, I saw
Balloon
that.
is Zoo.
Yeah. Are you going there?
Well, I was until I heard that it was a dual thing. Nah.
You don't do crowds.
Okay.
I mean, I have a place to stay because I can stay with my sister, but.
Is that the
Okay.
Fredericksburg?
No, Albuquerque.
Oh, in Albuquerque.
Yeah, it's the same.
Oh,
The
that's
Balloon
right.
Festival is the same. So this is the annular solar eclipse is coming very shortly, October 14th. I sent out a chapter 1 on a PDF. There's been 27 downloads, which really surprised me. So there is an interest in it. I'm working on the second chapter, which is going to be more about the how to set up your camera, how to track it, and more hands-on type of thing. And then looking at the weather, it looks like Wednesday, September 27th is going to be clear. So I will set up a pop-up and give you an address for Scenic Shore. You know, I'll bring my stuff. If you want to bring your tripods and your cameras and your filters, you know, we can talk about, you know, help you set it up and how to track it. You need to practice taking pictures of the sun before the solar eclipse just to be ready for it and understand how quickly the sun moves. So you have to have a methodology for taking care of that. And then again, this is just the map, and the yellow dots are where the annular eclipses, where you're getting the longest and the most symmetrical ring of fire. So Mike and I right now, we've got reservations in San Antonio, and then we're going to go west to Hondo. I'm doing backup reservations in Corpus Christi, because if San Antonio looks like it's going to be cloud covered, then maybe I can get it at Corpus Christi. So I'm keeping my options open. So anyway, if you really want to do it, you know, the reservations are, I just checked Corpus Christi. There's not a problem getting a room reservation there. So I don't think it's like when the total eclipse happened. So activities, Jim.
Yeah, I gave everybody should have gotten a questionnaire tonight. I
We're at
want,
the back door. They didn't get one.
okay, if you didn't get one, there's one over there. I want to get feedback from the members as to what is interesting to them. I kind of broke it down 3 things. One are day trips. We do day trips. We try to plan once a month. This one coming up on the 30th of September is College Station, to look at the football stadium, to look at the Bush Library, and then go into the student union and walk around the campus. In November, we're going to Glenwood Cemetery on a Saturday morning. I don't know if it's Saturday.
October 24th.
Huh?
October 24th for Glenwood
yeah.
Cemetery before the time change.
Yeah, October, before the time change.
Late summer.
And that's a morning drill to get the sunrise as it comes up with the skyline of Houston. So we've got lots of things we can do. Mural trips, blah, blah. A little more ambitious are overnight trips. We've done those since I've been in the club. We've gone to Vicksburg for it was 2 nights there. We've gone to Fredericksburg, and the courthouse tour that we're going to do one of these days is probably an overnight in Victoria, and then catch some of the neat courthouses. And finally is a extended week-long trip. And we've done a few of those. We did the Black Hills 2 years ago for a week, and very well received. We did Santa Fe last year. We only had 4 people going. And what other week long? Those are the 2 that I'm.
Those are the 2 big ones.
Yeah, the big ones.
And a while back, we did Big Band, but that's good.
That
Yeah.
that was before Jim
We did
joined.
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
Yeah, but there were only had what, 4 or 6 of you?
no, there was 2, 4, 6, 8. I think 8 of them.
Oh, it was 8?
There were
Okay.
7 of us, I think, at Yellowstone.
But there's
Yeah.
some pretty ambitious 1-week trips we can do. I just got back from for several days in Colorado Springs with my granddaughter. That place is an absolute wealth of photographic opportunities, depending on the time you go. And when I planned Santa Fe, part of the criteria was to find a venue that you can drive to or fly to. Colorado Springs fits that. You can drive out there in a day and a half, or you can fly nonstop from Houston. But anyway, what I need is feedback. If nobody's interested, no sense planning. So,
Jim?
yeah,
I haven't had a chance to talk to you, but I've talked to Kathy and a few others. I'm trying to also put together a proposal for next November, 2024, late November, early December, to go to Boston Apache to shoot sandhill cranes and waterfowl. Also the large array telescopes that were in the movie Contact, and maybe the sand dunes, white sands.
White Sands,
So I'm
out of Alamogordo
Yeah,
area.
I'm trying to work on a little itinerary. It would probably be right after Thanksgiving. but before the Crane Festival starts at the Boss, because that's kind of a crazy time.
Yeah.
We're gonna be there. So I'll keep you posted.
Yeah,
on what I-
and on the questionnaire, we're gonna put it on the website and stuff, but my phone number's on there, you can text me, my email's on there, you can send your responses to that. But I'll accumulate everybody, so, but I'd like to get a lot of feedback and see what people are interested in.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to talk about your photo wall?
Ken, there's nothing new there. We got the photo wall go.
Okay,
We'll probably talk to them about doing it, changing out photos every 3 months or so.
Steve said that you and he normally go there Thursday afternoons. So do you want to make that as like, hey, Thursday afternoon?
Yes,
Anybody
Steve's
wants to
got-
join us?
He's got a group from church, church and other folks he goes with on Thursdays,
Okay,
and I show up occasionally.
okay.
But yeah, I saw him there last Thursday. He was back in town.
Yeah, he's
So,
back
yeah,
in time now.
Any other time if people want to go, just shoot out something.
Yeah, I think it'd be
somebody
nice
did
to
that
go
one
as,
day, and we had
as
a
a
little
group.
that met over there, so, yeah, Emily and Chuck did.
Okay.
So we said every 3 months, I changed those out September, beginning around
And the,
August, July, so
the sign up, if you want to, is that somewhere online?
it's not yet, we'll put it out when we get kind of
Okay.
a month away from, changing them out again. You see,
Okay.
we have like 12 photos up there, so
Okay.
you can submit one, you can submit 3,
Mm-hmm.
see what
All
we get.
Well, excellent. And then the share and learn, which this is just the button, and everybody's been using it. Thank you very much. It's improved everything. This is all the people who participated this month. And what I've added is a graph of over the last 2 years. You can see the variability of the share and learn. And the average is about 37. We're below average. So I guess we're not as low. Some of them were like, one was down to 19, only 19 photos. So we're not quite there, but putting in your photos is really a nice way to add interest to your own interest.
69.
What?
What did we do on that one that did 69?
Yeah, you gotta look at the top.
That was the iPhone, I think. Your iPhone pictures.
That's it.
Yeah,
I see a trend.
yeah, a real trend. People like the iPhones.
Chuck will be happy.
Yeah, he will. So, well, Jim, Carl?
Yeah, Karen and I, my wife, we just, in August, we went up to Alaska. And one of the trips, or one of the excursions that we took was the flight up to Brooks Falls,
Mm-hmm,
where the bears gather.
mm-hmm,
And we were there at the falls taking pictures. I had planned to take a tripod, but then I read the rules and they said,
no
you gotta stay on the platform, you can't use a tripod. But when I got to the platform, there were 2 people using tripod, nobody seemed to care. It was late in the season, it wasn't that crowded, it wouldn't have been a big deal,
Mhm.
but I didn't have it. But this is a picture that I took, this is not a blurry one, but this is one that I took with a fast shutter speed, and you can see I got some nice detail there and everything else. Go to the next one. This is one where I tried to blur it, and it's down to the 15th of a second, and it's basically the same picture,
Mhm.
but the bear doesn't come out nearly as,
Sharp.
I was hand holding it with
Yeah.
my elbows on the.
Next time. Stay still.
But it's a 500 millimeter lens with
Oh.
trying to hold it completely still and.
You didn't
Yeah.
have a,
So, I like the picture, but I really wish I had a tripod
yeah.
because.
They didn't have a railing that you could put it on or?
Well, there was a railing there
Mhm.
and I put my elbows on the railing and
Okay.
held the camera and
Yeah.
that helped.
Yeah,
But it's not the same as having it on a nice solid tripod.
I found it easier if you put the camera on the railing to hold it than trying to hold it because you're gonna move.
Yeah.
You're gonna move.
Or to
Yeah.
use a bottom.
Anybody who's on
My,
the platform-
my problem is the railing is that high and my head, well, my back has been giving me problems. And leaning over and trying to do it.
Getting down.
I probably could have flipped the screen up if I thought about it and so on,
yeah.
but this was, I was taking a whole bunch of
Let's do this,
pictures and
Carl.
I didn't know that we were doing word pictures. And I just said, I'll give this a try. So I took one.
So I will say a piece of equipment that you might want to look into,
What's that?
a piece of equipment that you might want to look into is a platypus.
Yeah.
Chuck has platypod.
Yeah.
I have one.
Oh,
And
yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, that's true, tripod.
It's got a flat-
You can't bring tripods, that's what you bring.
yeah, but it has
Nobody
a,
knows it, and then put it to
it's a
yourself.
flat base.
Yeah.
So you can set it on the railing and then you can hold it.
And it's got a
So,
tripod head.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
got a
and-
tripod head on it.
yeah, and it's, so it's got,
Something else.
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll have to see what
Put that on
that
your
is.
Christmas list.
yeah, I can put an example on the website.
Because
Photoshop.
Because the salmon mostly run in June and July, and we were there in August, and the salmon had mostly gone up. And it was interesting, the bears were sitting below the falls, and they were looking upstream, because what happens is the salmon go up, they spawn and die, and then they come
They come back.
downstream, and the bears catch the dead salmon and eat them.
Ah,
Now, the water is really cold, and I'm sure the salmon aren't
or
too
decomposed.
gone.
Yeah.
But that's what they gorge on before the winter.
Ah,
And there was, no, I didn't include a picture, but there was a bear there. The ranger said his name was 747. And he was the only one I saw catch a fish. He caught a salmon that must have been a couple feet long, and he ate that thing in about 2 minutes.
oh,
And the ranger said right now he weighs about 900 pounds. And before he goes to hibernate, he's probably going to be up around 1,200 pounds. But his belly was already dragging on the rocks. I mean,
There's a webcam for those falls, and you can actually watch during the season. Watch
Yeah.
it happen at night and at day, so it's like a dark, nighttime camera. Yeah, it's really.
yeah. Anyway,
Well, there's not much dark.
and this is a waterfall near Skagway. So we took a cruise for the first week. We stopped in Skagway and we went up the canyon and stopped, and this is a waterfall. I had a tripod.
yeah.
So that's a nice waterfall.
No, that is nice. Chuck?
Speaking of waterfalls.
So speaking of waterfalls, this is a waterfall in Bella Vista, Arkansas. They probably don't pronounce it Bella Vista. They probably say Bella Vista. Anyways, Helen and I went up a couple of years ago. It is a fabulous place for fall color. If you're ever looking for fall color, that's not too far away. The waterfall was taken slow shutter speed, probably about 2 seconds, I imagine. Composed with a little rock in the foreground for a little depth, and I think I actually put some of those leaves there to make it, because it's fall. It's supposed to have some
Post
leaves.
processing?
Huh?
No, really?
No, in person.
In person.
Ah,
In
okay.
person, you walk up and you put the leaves, the pictures. Well, so that's done, and then of course. post
So
processing.
Helen was down on the ground holding.
Yeah,
the-
that's anyways, that's Bella Vista. Okay, I'm calling that Choctaw. It was in Choctaw country up in Oklahoma. Helen was at a conference in Dallas, and I took off and went up and got a little cabin in this park up there and took some pictures. Sitting there in the early morning, I got out there before sunrise, and then waited for the sun to come up behind me. The sun was behind me at that point. And as the sun came up, it started lighting that rock up, and the steam, this mist coming off the river up above, was just like heaven. I mean, it was beautiful.
It is good.
You don't watch your camera settings.
No idea what the camera settings. No idea. It was probably a second and a half, 2 seconds for shutter speed. I find that for silky water, that's what we call it, silky water. That anything longer than that gets to be, you lose all the texture in the water and stuff. Okay, it's a little hard to see on the screen here, but this is downtown Houston. And there's a fountain in the foreground. This is the total post-processing. That was taken midday, sunny, awful looking, everything. But I like things to look like Batman City. So it's all about lines and shapes in this picture. It's really what it's about. So it's all processed, and the lighting is all relit using radial gradients and things like that to make it look like I want it to look.
Very cool. Chris?
Okay, well, some of you know that I have a lot of grandchildren. And one of them is on the freshman volleyball team over at Atascocita High School. And so I photograph her and all her teammates. And then after every game, after I've edited stuff, I put them up on a Flickr album, and all the kids have access to it, and they download them and all this. This little girl is on their team, and she's very petite. But when she jumps to do a serve, she floats. I cannot figure out how she floats like this.
Wow, yeah.
So I'm shooting with a Canon R7, 15 frames a second, and fairly high ISO, so I can get a 1250th to 1600th of a shutter speed to try and freeze the action. Her hands blurred just a little bit. Anyway, so I shot these, and this, by the way, is a neat trick for if you want, we're only supposed to put 3 images in, but if you want to get more than 3 this is the images right here. So what I did was I first edited them, cropped them, and they were all very similar because it was like took them. So I got where I liked the exposure. I tried to get a white wall. The gym floors are so yellow, they make the kids' legs look yellow. And then I just said, whoa, I'm going to pull 3 of these into a little canvas on Photoshop that'll be the right dimension for it. The other thing I did before I took it to Photoshop was I used Lightroom's AI noise, and it's amazing. And with my new computer, it takes a matter of seconds. It's done. So I don't have to.
Fast computer, that AI noise takes 7 minutes.
I used to go get a cup of coffee or something, or a glass of wine. Now it's like I just think it's done. So anyway, so that's my picture of a girl in action with volleyball. Okay, this is taken down in Geelong, Australia, which is on the Great Ocean Road south of Melbourne. And my wife had a project there. Shell had a big refinery, and they had in the summer they do a Ferris wheel. And I shot it in the daytime, I shot it in the afternoon, in the morning, and I shot it at night. And night is the coolest time for Ferris wheels. There's too long exposure. But I tried to get a good exposure. It worked out where the lights, these ambient, lights they had lit up really nicely, and people were flying around on that thing.
How'd you get those different colors?
It's one of these, who knows how, I don't know how they make Ferris wheels, but if they use LED lighting, but the lights all changed at certain times. So I imagine a section is going like purple, and then it goes, and so it's an overlap. Yeah, it just got them that way.
This is cool.
This is when you want to use a very fast shutter speed. I call this one wash, rinse, and spin. This was down at River Grove Park, and I've just gotten this crazy Canon 800 millimeter f11 lens, and it worked out. You've got to make sure you have enough light when you're using it, but this bird was just doing a bath thing, and he was just flipping around. I got a quick picture.
Oh, great shot.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, Emily.
This is on my cousin's property up in upstate New York, and it's a 4-second exposure. Just to get a little bit of smoothness to the water. And it was pretty dark. That's f32, ISO 100, and 4 seconds. And this was at the mud run many years ago. They had a mud run, and they hired a few of us to come and take photographs of people. You go through all kinds of wet, muddy stuff in a race, and you climb up, you climb over, you go under this net, and when you come out, you're very rarely clean. And so this was a shot that I took. It was only a 6/40th of a second, but it came out.
Oops.
And then this was just a droplet falling off my house, and I tried a lot of different speeds and stops and stuff to see what it took to catch kind of the essence of movement.
You didn't take that this summer, did you? Because we didn't have any.
Oh, no, this was yesterday.
That is
But it
cool.
was a 25th of a second.
Yeah.
You know,
I would have guessed that was a lot faster.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
But it was-
interesting.
Jim.
Yeah, this was a couple of years ago. I was over in Austin with my son, and it had actually rained and Barton Creek was flowing. And I had just gotten my iPhone 13 Pro. And so they have live view on there, and I'd been watching instructions. So I said, well, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna use the iPhone and take some of the waterfalls as the water flowed down Barton Creek. And all I did there, when you take the picture with the iPhone 13 Pro, you have to have live view on. It stops the action, but then there's an edit feature that says long exposure. I click on long exposure, and that's what I got. And there's a couple more. Yeah, that's another one. And I can't tell. Is that one?
There's this one.
That's the other one. Yeah. And that one came out extremely well with the long exposure edit on live view.
Mhm.
So it's just all about the iPhone.
And this one was just Jim. This one was just the.
That was probably what that doesn't look like it's stopped. Yeah, see that's before the edit on live view.
Okay.
That's what live view looks like when
Before the edit.
I should have gotten closer, but then that was, and you can toggle back and forth.
John?
I don't know if it's still on. I don't see him.
Okay, I've turned my mute off and I'm
Oh.
back on live now. This
Excellent.
is the falls in Yosemite.
Mhm.
And what I wanted to do was get the rainbow in the falls, get that little tree in front of the falls, but also I didn't want the falls to be super sharp because when I looked at it, when I tried that, it didn't look as good as what this one does, where I slowed things down. I got more of the rainbow.
Nice. That's gorgeous. And you can only do that like one time of the year, right?
No. This is Yosemite Falls. This isn't the one that you can get in February.
Okay.
I've actually had a reservation one time to go up there for that time of the year, but they got too much snow and canceled everything, so I didn't go. But this is regular Yosemite taken Thanksgiving a couple years ago.
Underexposing makes you rain.
And I like motorsports. And so this is 1/2000th of a second over at the Formula One racetrack in Austin. This is Hamilton's Mercedes 2 years ago as he's coming out of the chicane on turn 13. It was really fun to be able to go over there and see the Formula One race.
Yeah.
And this is a Cara photograph taken down at one of the bird ranches down at McAllen. Ruth Allen, Ruth leads some photo tours down there. And so this was one of her photo tours, and probably the best Cara picture that I got out of the trip.
That's gorgeous. Nora, is Nora on?
Yes,
Yes.
Oh, excellent. I love this photo.
thank you. So I shot at 1/60th to mimic falling rain using a lawn sprinkler. I followed an online tutorial I had seen years ago and had always wanted to try. Definite plus was that I could shoot them in my backyard. The roses were backlit by the morning sun. And I used the gold side of a reflector for fill. It was a bit of a challenge trying to position a sprinkler water to fall on the roses just right. So it was several tries. I did have to buy a dozen roses and a lawn sprinkler, but it was worth it. Had lots of fun.
Yeah, that is a very cool shot. Yeah, that's
Thank you.
Oh, and this is the first time she's participated in Share and Learn. So thank you. A good photo to start with.
Thank you.
This was in my backyard last month. I think it was at a 3200, and I was playing with the electronic shutter, shooting 40 frames a second, and because I hardly ever can get two in one photo. So yeah, the one on the left was dive bombing. The one on the right had come in for a drink, and the one on the left was chasing them off. And just got them there together.
Is that sunshine or is it a flat?
That was natural light.
Nice light on it. Nice.
And Slot
This one,
Canyon.
although there's nothing to blur, but it was a long exposure. That was a 10-second. Last month we went to Zion to a slot canyon. It's actually a photography tour, so there was someone there talking us through what to do. But this, I think it was Peekaboo Canyon, and you can see some little hole. They call them monkey hole, monkey steps, because the canyon temperatures were so cool that the Native Americans would use it for food storage. So they would climb up those. They would and carve those into it, and they would climb up and store food up on those shelves. But I like it for the colors, but I thought that was interesting too.
And
Did you have to rappel down there? Or?
No, it's a slot canyon. We just walked through it.
You just walk through?
You weren't climbing up there with the no climbing involved.
It's
A
like
lot of them have to
a
rappel.
canyon. It's another canyon.
I'd like to do that sometime. Steve, is Steve online?
I didn't say
I didn't see him check in.
Okay.
I
Steve,
guess this is the rodeo.
Yeah.
yeah, Steve is our rodeo champion photographer. And I think this is probably from South Dakota.
Yeah, it looks like an outdoor.
Yeah, recently. And he just amazing shots. And then he got this one to show a slow. This is a different look of the rodeo. A slow.
Great motion.
And he's got the lasso going. That's really cool. And then this was the Needles, the Milky Way in South Dakota.
Was that one we went to?
We didn't go to this. We didn't go to this one, but
The Scarborough.
It's in
Yeah.
Custard State Park.
yeah,
In Custard State Park.
this has a very narrow road, so I'm not sure where he's set up for that. And then Tim.
All right, so good swimming. Summer league swim. Everything's just pretty fast shutter speed because it's really bright and really hot. So my daughter doing breaststroke.
Now, is it all three? Do you have one of each
Just
daughters? Okay.
My daughter doing backstroke.
Yeah.
And they're all like 2000-ish, 2000 or more. And then my other daughter.
What is that, butterfly or what is it?
Yep. Butterfly.
So for this shot, how close are you to the water? I mean, you're on the edge, but
Yeah, I mean the camera's basically on the deck.
yeah, on the deck. That is a cool.
I don't get down and lay down anymore like I used to, but I flip the screen out. And now that live you want to put the screen
Great.
well on this camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without having to get up and down 4 million times.
Yeah, exactly.
Just shoot it back.
Okay, Mike.
This is from the air show, I guess about 4 years ago with the Blue Angels came down for that on there.
The Blue Angels don't always come for Wings Over
Yeah.
Houston. The last couple of years, the Blue Angels, and to
Yeah,
me,
they
they're
have the Air
the
Force guys, the last one.
yeah, they're the
And we got a special deal. We paid. We got to go with the photography pit there and sit down. Got a lot
so
of
we
great
were right
shots.
down in front. We had room for the tripod. Didn't
Yeah.
have people crowding us. They had snacks and drinks, bathrooms.
That was when I first started to use my camera. And then this is I don't know how you pronounce that. The jungle on Foss. Foss means waterfall. So and that was in Iceland, and we were there about 3 or 4 years ago, and that is known as the land of rainbows. And this one comes thundering over the water there, and
It's great.
and then finally, this is from Maui. And actually, if you go to the left there, that's where the fires down that road, where the fires were. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see the
road
windmills up there on the
Do
side
you
of the hill.
just pre-focus in a certain area and hope they jump or?
Yeah, That's what you gotta do, yeah.
Yeah.
You just shoot a whole bunch at about 1/200 or something.
You just hope you're on the right side of the boat.
Yeah.
Because half the
This
time,
guy though, he's great because, he comes out with a cloth and he cleans off your lens if it gets water.
Really?
He hands out margaritas for you. You have ribs, shrimp. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, it's a really good.
now, the problem is when you've got a big camera trying to enable margarita in the camera and then operate the camera, it's a little, I have to chug them down and I'm sure we'll.
But I was
Shoot me,
surprised. This wasn't nearly as good. I used Luminar, and they have that super sharpened AI on there, and it's amazing how much that, because the way it was actually kind of blurry, and man, it just sharpened that up.
Well, Tamron has really good.
All right, so we're down to me.
No, not Tamron.
I call this incoming. I was on Cape Canaveral Beach waiting for the rocket to go up with my sister, and all of a sudden I see this pelican coming in, and this is just one of those where you just hope you catch the shot.
Yeah.
And I happen to get, and I love, he's got the shadow, and he's a big bird. I mean, he sat over there. People were where he wanted to be, and he was trying to shoo him away. But I was very fortunate to just catch that like that. So that's incoming. This is Magic Lights of Prague. This was taken several years ago, but this is the tram that goes by at night. So that's where all the lights are. And that's one of the watchtowers that they have. If you've not been to Prague, Prague is a photographer's dream because of all the towers and stuff. It is amazing, phenomenal
Those
city.
spires, they have very unique towers because they have those spires on
Yeah.
the top.
So we were staying in a hotel, in a ARBO that was right next. It was right behind me where I was set up with the tripod, and that had a backstory of the German soldiers were staying in that building during World War II. So Prague was occupied, but it wasn't destroyed. And then this is the game run by Tyler White, 2018, I think, ISO 4000. 250 millimeter. They actually let me bring my camera and the big lens into the game. We were there with an Exxon retiree club. They got special tickets for it, 1/50th of a second. So he is just there stepping on the home run. Now this is segueing into what I want to talk about next, and it's called Change of Batters. And first of all, I want to recognize that the club has an amazing team that have done a tremendous job for our members, for you. And no one person can manage to do everything that they do, and I sincerely thank them for their time and talents. However, a social club built on a few volunteers is like a team with a limited roster. The loss or addition of a few can change the outcome of the game. We want to envision our club a decade from now still serving its members and our community. We all have skill sets we honed while working or volunteering that can benefit our club's future. And it is not feasible to expect the same members to continue managing this club indefinitely. We are volunteers that have personal lives we also manage. Please consider how your skill sets and enthusiasm can help us achieve this goal. Add your name to our team and bring your new ideas forward. And this is a list of the current members and committees with contact numbers. So if you would have an interest and would like to get involved with the club in some manner, we welcome you. We'll find a place for you. And our news, I mean, Chris just took over membership. He's doing a great job with that. He has plans to start sending out notifications in November for renewals and stuff. So he's done an excellent job. So new members bring new life. It's like oxygen. You need oxygen. And if you've got it, it energizes everything. So that's my spiel.
And just, I mean, you mentioned Chris is also doing the post-processing SIG. I mean, there's other SIGs that we could have if somebody were interested in doing, you know. To go to the Woodlands has different SIGs. So there are other things you can do other than being just
oh yeah, no.
So you could do things like run a special interest group or things like that.
Yeah, no, there's photography is such a large field and varied. Photography is very, very Connie has done an excellent job bringing forward some of the different, like underwater photography and cave photography, things that you're not really exposed to, but are out there. And it could be Mike, years ago, you brought the astrophotography, the priest. That's how Mike got interested in it. That's when he said, oh,
That
gee,
nice little priest.
yeah, little
I always
priest.
remember that was the priest that connected it.
I know. She was- So, I mean, so it's things that kind of click. So anyway, our next meeting is October 17th. The program is Galapagos Islands, A Journey of Wonder by Kevin Longland. And Share and Learn is members' choice. So I'm expecting to be inundated with photos because it's members' choice. It's anything goes. iPhones, non-iPhone, whatever. So you choose. Jim.
I've seen some pictures that were on.
Oh my God.
They were so bad,
No, I thought I had them in there. I am so sorry. No, but they will be in the gallery. I remember seeing them because Jim, and
they were so bad.
no, they weren't. No, they weren't so bad. I really try. I'm sorry. Go this, this box of shame or whatever over here. So anyway, and then November 14th is enhancing your photos before and after. So 4 photos, 2 befores, 2 afters. So you're going to show what it looked like before you post-process it, and then what it looked like after. So, a little more explanation of what you did to get there. I mean, it could be as simple as I changed the sky, or whatever. I had to get rid of this. So anyway, that is going to be November. And finally, thanks for all of you coming tonight. Not as big a group as last month, but still, I'm so happy to see faces and connect names with faces that you don't always get to. And remember what we have our Christmas social coming in December. So hopefully you'll all come for that too. So anyway, thank you all. I do think, are you doing an after snacks? Is somebody, Connie?
Big City Wings.
Big city.
Where?
Big City Wings.
Big City Wings. So we're doing an after social at Big City Wings, which is in the front of Kingwood.
Right there on Kingwood Drive. I don't have the address.
Okay.
I tell them where we're going because I didn't know where we were going. Everybody said,
Okay. All right. So anyway, so thank you all. Maybe you can join us for after meeting snacks at Big City Wings, and see you all next month. Okay. Thank you.